Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this session and welcome to Finding Hidden Revenue in Your Docks. I am Meghan Keaney-Anderson. I am currently wishing that I was in Nashville right now. I'm so sorry I'm not there in person with you, but my mother is sick, and so I'm trying to limit travel right now. And so I have to be here with you virtually, but I am nevertheless very excited to speak with you about this topic. I think it's a very timely one, and I can't wait to dive in. I am CMO of Dockwa and Marinas.com, two marketplaces where boaters can come to find everything from slip rentals to long-term storage to fuel docks, etc. So in this talk, I'm going to go through a few things that we've learned from working with nearly 1,000 marinas and watching many of them really use this year's boater boom to open up new revenue for their properties. So we're going to go through a number of ideas, but if you want to dig deeper into any of them beyond what you see here, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. My contact details are here. And luckily, my colleague, Dan DeGeorge, is there at the event. So, and you guys got the better end of the deal because he's way more fun than I am. So if you want to get in touch with him, you can reach him at just dan@dockwa.com and maybe arrange a time to meet up if he's got some availability left in his schedule. So feel free to follow up. There's a lot we're going to cover, and I'm trying to cover it at the right level of detail to give you something actionable to take out of this. But certainly there's more and more we could dig into for well beyond this. Okay, let's get going. So it's been a heck of a year. I think that I don't need to tell that to any of you. And if I'm being honest, I should probably say it's been a heck of 2 years or 3 years, depending on when you start tracking. We've been through a lot. But I think if we're talking just about boaters and boating, then really the last year has been a fascinating one in terms of understanding kind of where this space is going. So, you know, if you just go by the headlines, this has been the year of the boater. We thought last year was the year of the boater. This is really it. So we've all been hearing about the boater boom for a while now, excuse me. And, you know, you may have seen this in action in your own properties. But the truth is it's getting weird out there, right? So take this guy, for example. This is Nick Riley. Nick realized just how hard it is to buy a boat these days because the supply and the demand are all off. And he decided to take a child sandbox, a little tyke, and just attach a motor to it. And he didn't stop there. He moved on and he got it registered. And so he's fully paperworked. This is an actual person in, I believe he lives in Kentucky, but this is in the Monroe Reservoir. And he's out on the waters and he's manufacturing these things and giving them away, I think, to family and friends. So, you know, I don't know how many of you saw this story, but if Nick is any indication, it's hard out there to get a boat because so many of the boats are already on the water. So getting a little bit odd out there. The bottom line here is they are coming. And many of you have probably already seen them in your own marinas, in your own spaces, and dealt with this influx. What we're going to talk about today, though, is how do we do that in kind of a more intentional way? How do we figure out where boating is heading for the next few years, and then adapt our strategies to really take advantage of that? Because it's not just, you know, with the exception of Nick's vehicle, this isn't just a fad or a short-term purchase. Buying a boat is like adopting a dog. You're in it for the long haul. And so that means secondary markets. That means lots of additional spending. Not only are you in it for the long haul, but so is your wallet. And so what that means for all of us is we have to find moments like this event to take a step back and figure out, how do we adapt to this new influx? How do we figure out what the right next step is for our marinas? Unless you think that this is all just hype, let me show you some of the numbers that we've seen this year coming through Dockwa in particular. So we've seen a 313% year-over-year increase in marina stays booked through Dockwa just in Q1 of this year. That was even in the early part of our season, and we saw that only kind of grow throughout the summer. We also saw 112% year-over-year growth in boater reservations coming through our system just last month, just in November. And so this has really maintained the demand, and it's hitting across the board on all sorts of different types of boat owners and all sorts of different types of regions and marinas. So, for example, Dockwa boaters, they run the gamut, but we've done some sort of market sizing and research, and about 60% of the boaters with boats over 40 feet are using Dockwa in some way. And when you zero in even further to really large boaters, we've seen with just that population, 111% year-over-year booking growth, almost 300% year-over-year booking growth in April, which was the start of the season for many. And then a sizable user growth as well within these kind of larger, lucrative boaters. So today's boaters are growing in number. They're becoming more diverse. They're becoming younger. And it's happening at every vessel size that we can see. So let's find some revenue out of this, shall we? My guess is that you've probably had a pretty big year already, but even with a big year, there's still room for finding some more hidden revenue opportunities within your overall demand funnel and within your customer base. Typically, we're going to look at this for like 3 different lenses. The first is, because I know this is sort of a mixed audience. So the first lens is, let's say, despite the boater boom, you're still not at 100% occupancy, and that's a pretty steady, static state. Maybe it's your location, maybe you're new, but there is a cohort of people that are still seeing low occupancy. And so some of these strategies will be designed to bring occupancy up across the board for those marinas. The second cohort that I want to talk with here is a cohort of more mixed occupancy. And this is actually the most common, where you may look out at your slips and think that they're all full, right? You may say, oh God, we've been busy, we've seen that uptick. But when you actually look at the numbers, you may start to see that actually we're really full at some parts of the year, and we're really full on some days, but we do have some predictable dips, maybe midweek, if you're in a seasonal location, maybe at some shoulder seasons. And so we've got a separate set of strategies for more mixed occupancy use cases within this presentation as well. And then finally, there are those of you, lucky you, who are fully, truly maxed out on occupancy. And I would say even then, even still, there are chances to grow revenue, even if you're at 100% occupancy your entire year long, every single day. So we're going to hit upon some different strategies for each of these buckets of use cases, and hopefully you'll find yourself in one of these and can find these useful. Sound good? It's so hard to not be in the room with you and see, so I'm just going to imagine you are all smiling and clapping and loving this, and don't tell me if you're not. All right. So a little bit of a disclaimer. Listen, I'm not going to tell you anything that your instincts haven't already told you. I'm sitting at a desk. I specialize in demand generation. You run your marinas. You know your business and your property inside and out. You're the expert here, not me. But what I am going to tell you, or what I'm going to give you, is a little bit of time, because I know your days are hectic, to think through those instincts, and a couple of practical frameworks and approaches to put those instincts to work and run some experiments and test some things out to see if you can find a lever that will really change your revenue next year. So does that sound fair? Okay, great. Okay, so beginning this, finding where the opportunity is, it starts by knowing where you're starting, what your starting place is on occupancy. As I said, there's 3 buckets there. There's probably more buckets beyond that, but 3 that we're going to focus on. We need to know, you need to know which of those you fall into, because your approach is going to differ based on that occupancy. So many of you already know this. Many of you are on Marina management software that with the click of a button can give you an occupancy report, can show you where your high seasons and low seasons are. I'm going to assume that not all of you are, though. And so I'm going to go through a way that you can take a deeper look at your occupancy through just spreadsheets and the numbers that you have. And if you are on software, if you already have this, feel free to look at your phones during this section. But I do want to give like an even footing for everybody who may not be. Okay, so what we're hunting for here are gaps in occupancy. And the way that we want to find that is through really 2 calculations. One is by figuring out what your typical average occupancy rate is. And then 2 is figuring out what are your occupancy rates for with different filters on that quotient, right? So to figure out your occupancy gaps, you have to have a few things: your season in length, in days, the number of linear feet you have available, including your moorings out to sea, and then the total confirmed feet sold by day. That's all. These are things that most of you have readily available, and are numbers that you can pull. It's also good to have these bottom 3, the rates that you've charged for those feet sold, the assignment groups that you have, and the vessel group sizes that are driving that demand, because those are different lenses that might help us find some of that hidden revenue and just get a better perspective on where the growth could be. Okay, I'm just going to pause here in case anybody wants to write this down. Awesome. Okay, so simply put, you're going to find your average occupancy day. Simple formula: the season length in days by the total available feet over your total confirmed feet. That's going to give you your overarching average occupancy rate for your property, right? And that's great and that's useful, but if you've got any fluctuation in there, that's not on its own going to tell you much about how to grow. You'll get a number like 80%. But again, there could be some days in there that are 100%. There could be days in there that are really sort of dogs and are dragging you down. And so in addition to this overarching number, this is really like your benchmark where you're going to figure out, okay, where are you above average and where are you below average across the course of your season and across the different vessel types that you have. So from there, you're going to want to figure out your specific occupancy rates. And you want to take a slice of this by the days of the week, by the times of the year, by the different vessel types or booking types, any kind of different lens that you think would matter for your business. And this is where your expertise comes in. You want to rerun that occupancy calculator just for those lenses, just for those sort of specific subcategories, and compare that against your broader number. And so what that will give you is something that looks like this, right? If you're doing this in a spreadsheet, you're going to get your occupancy rate by day, by season, and you're really going to look for like, where are there dips? And were those dips anomalies? Did it happen once and never again? Maybe it was a bad storm. Were those dips more repeatable? Were they times of years, days of the week? And that's where you're going to zero in on to figure out, okay, if I'm going to raise revenue anywhere, I'm going to raise it here. I'm going to move this number, maybe not to 100%, but maybe from 70 to 80%. Because again, we can't take on we can't boil the ocean here. We've got to pick a few spots that will make a meaningful difference in the amount of revenue that you bring in a given year. So look for those patterns and those dips. You can do this just like by days or by seasons. You can also do this by vessel type. So are you seeing different patterns in larger boats versus smaller boats? Are there changes that you could make to the way that you program your marina to adapt to those needs? The beauty about a marina versus, a hotel or a campsite is that you have that malleability to sort of change the way that you create these booking groups or program your layout. And overall here, you're looking for patterns. What are the spots of weakness in your occupancy? What causes that weakness? It could be something very normal, that weekends are more popular than Tuesday afternoons to go boating. But if those trends are consistent and predictable, you can match those trends up with levers to address them. And that's where you're going to start to see some of the growth. So again, none of this is rocket science. None of this is anything that you haven't thought of, but let's use this time. You've spent made the investment to come to this event. Let's use this time to actually give yourself a little bit of space to think and assess where those patterns are and make a plan for how you'll address them before you get back into the busyness of the day-to-day. So, as I said, I think there's probably 3 neat buckets that we can put these scenarios into. Diagnosis number 1 is that your occupancy is just too low across the board. Maybe you're sitting at 70% occupancy most days. That's your average when you do that simple math. And there's a set of strategies we can do to elevate occupancy in a cohesive, constant way, right? That you're not going to have to constantly run promotions for or try to create short-term spikes for, that we can find a way to drive more demand across the board. I'll go into that first, and then we'll move on to, okay, what about spikes in occupancy? How do we target short-term promotions, partnerships, that kind of thing? And then finally, we'll get to the lucky crew of you who just want to find more revenue and they're actually set on occupancy. So first up though, let's deal with the groups of you who have just too low of occupancy, regardless of the reason of what that could be. There's 2 ways you can elevate your occupancy and your revenue in a very sustainable way. One is by going after demand, and the other is by improving your conversion rates. So by demand, I mean the number of people calling you up, the number of people searching you online. And by conversion, I mean the number of people who actually get through to a booking. They sign that contract for the long-term wet storage, or they make the payment for the short-term transient stay. Those are the 2 levers that we have here. And if we fix the lever, we can forget about it, and then it will continuously grow. So let's start with the sort of demand problem at the top of the funnel. Most business starts here. Even if you don't have a website, most marina business is going to start from boaters searching online. It's just how business happens today. And so if you'll allow me for a couple of minutes, I'm going to get out of presenter mode, and then I'm going to go through kind of the back end of what happens in a search to try to talk through how do we improve our demand coming through this very important top of the funnel for our business. So if I'm a boater, let's say hopefully I'm not Nick Riley and I'm not trying to put a sandbox in the harbor with a motor. Hopefully I'm a boater that's got a beautiful 40-foot boat. But let's say I am one of those new boaters who just purchased this year. The very first thing I'm going to do as I've made that decision to purchase a boat is to figure out where am I going to store it. And that search is probably going to start right here at the search box. So let's say I decide to search for Lake Michigan marinas. And this is where I'm going to ask for your patience as I switch over to actual tabs. All right. So let's say I searched for Lake Michigan marinas. That's where I want to store my boat. Maybe I don't know the marinas there yet, so I don't have a specific name. I'm just going to give a general search. Let me walk through the results here, because this is really important to driving demand for all of you sort of low occupancy marinas out there. So a couple things that I will draw your attention to about this search results page. What do we notice here? We got Dockwa, that's us, that's the directory. Obviously, There's a reason I picked this search. We got a bunch of questions here. We got Waterway Guide. Okay, that's another directory. We got some maps. We got Snag a Slip. Oh, that's another directory. We got the Michigan Harbors Guide. That's another directory. And oh, all the way down here, I think this is the 6th or 7th place. We've got Lake Michigan Marina, an actual marina. Now, why does this happen? Well, it happens because search engines favor directories. They favor these aggregator sites because there's more a diverser array of value coming out of them than just a single marina. Now, I could give you a whole search engine optimization strategy to move Lake Michigan Marina up 2 or 3 or 4 spots, but the simpler thing, because none of you have time to do an SEO course, is to just find a way to get your marina into all of these directories so that when we do search, when I, as a boater, do search for a marina, I see your marina right there. And you're right there at the first moment of consideration. If you're not listed in here, the odds that I'm going to see you are pretty invisible. So if you've got a demand problem, again, even if you don't have a website, even if the directory is the only place where you list, you're going to want to make sure that you get here. Now, the other thing that I will draw your attention to here is another opportunity at the search box. So yes, we're like write down, make sure you're in every directory possible. Make sure you're listed on Dockwa, on the Waterway Guide, on, you know, all these different directories that you could be found in. The second thing I'll draw your attention to is, see this people also ask box. This is a common like device that Google uses to get people the answer that they want. And you'll see these questions. Every one of these questions indicates that there's actually some search volume behind it. So how much does a boat slip cost on Lake Michigan? Can you live on a boat in Lake Michigan? Each of these are opportunities, if you do have a website, for you to create a simple piece of content that answers these questions. And if you do create that content, you could surface here, you know, instead, actually Lake Michigan Marina, very smart, they did that, right? They created a piece of content that brought them up from what was their number 7 ranking to all the way above the fold. I'm gonna pause there because I just gave you a lot of information. So the 2 ways, to recap, that I would try to move up in search is not, again, you don't need to do a whole bunch of search engine optimization, but it is making sure that even if you're not listed number 1 for your region, that you are in the directories and ranking well in those directories. And if there are opportunities to create content on your website that addresses some of these common questions, that you do so. Now, you may say like, oh, is this really going to make a difference? I'm not technical. I hate dealing with websites. I hired that out. For that, I want to go back to the slide deck to sort of show you what that could mean in terms of actual demand. And again, it's hidden demand. It's demand that you just aren't seeing today because maybe you're ranked lower for your region. So thank you for that. Allowing me to go over there. I'm going to hop back over to the presentation. All right, so this is what that looks like in the back end. If I search for Lake Michigan Marinas as a new boat owner of a yacht, because I'm going to be kind to myself, this is what each of those links gets in terms of search traffic. So this black box over here shows you that this is that Dockwa is getting 500 monthly searches for the term Lake Michigan Marinas, right? And you can see the rest of the search traffic here. Backlinks basically means how many other websites are linking into them, and the more other websites link to you, the higher your search ranking typically. But we won't go into that. That's too in the weeds. If you want to talk about that, you can reach out to me afterwards. But the thing here is, this is 500 searches a month. This is not anything to you know, discard or not think through. This could be real dollars. If even, you know, 10% of those come through as business for your marina, and does so in a kind of recurring way, that elevates your demand for those of you that have lower occupancy as a steady basis. And the nice thing is that's free, right? It's not going to cost you anything in most of these cases to get listed or to drive enough reviews so that you get elevated in those review sites to get that traffic. That's why this search is a powerful lever for us when we're trying to find more revenue for our business. Now, let's take it away from the search box for a minute. Let's take it offline entirely. Another way that you can drive demand if your occupancy is really low across the board is by striking partnerships. A partnership is what allows us to take advantage of someone else's larger audience to siphon off some for your own and hopefully provide some value to that partner as well. So for example, I'm up in Massachusetts, way less warm right now than Nashville, I would assume. But this is a map of kind of my hometown area. And let's say you are this little marina back here in an inlet that the blue arrow is pointing to. Maybe you're just not getting demand because you're out of sight, out of mind. Maybe you're in a tough spot. You're up a river, you're in an inlet, you just aren't seen. What partnerships can you strike with nearby marinas to take some of their overflow reservations or long-term contracts? If they don't have space for maybe this marina with the green arrow is getting a ton of demand and they just don't have space, can you strike a rev share, like a revenue share model or a partnership with them to take their overflow? Can you create a water taxi that will take someone from your marina to their desired location and invest in sort of expanding your footprint that way? If that's not a possibility, what are the other nearby partners? Are there restaurants that you can do special nights with for, discounts with? Are there nearby boat dealers where you could get in right as someone is buying their first boat? Partnerships as a strategy is a good way to create something once that can drive continuous value over the long term. And then I also talked about increasing conversions. So one of the most straightforward ways to do this is to just offer online booking. By adding a form to your website, you're going to be able to catch all of those people who want to book but don't call you during office hours. We did some research and found that 73% of boaters prefer online to the phone when it comes to sending inquiries, making reservations. And even in our own, that's just public opinion, but in our own numbers, we're seeing reservations, 35% of our reservations are coming in off hours, right? They come in at 10 o'clock at night after a person has gone through their day and watched their late night TV show and now are making their reservations. And without an online form, they're probably either not calling you because they know you're closed, or they are calling you, getting a voicemail, and you could lose them in the extra steps and friction of that process. So simplest way, take online reservations. Other stuff I would look to if you are already taking online reservations to increase that conversion rate is how do you make that, that contract signing process more streamlined, because you lose people at every step along the way. So again, if you're low on occupancy, it could be not that you've got a demand problem, but that you've got a conversion problem and there are just too many barriers in the way to actually getting that contract signed. So can you offer e-signature to speed up the process? Can you get some technology that will allow you to auto trigger follow-up emails to chase after unsigned contracts while you sleep? There are a lot of ways to make that process more thorough and also more streamlined for the boater so they don't kind of lose steam along the way. All right. So those are a few tangible ways to find revenue when your scenario is that you've got low occupancy across the board. Search, conversion optimization, partnerships. These are things that you can set up once and they'll continue to deliver demand every single day in a compounding way from that point forward. All great stuff to do. But let's say you've got inconsistent occupancy. So you run that those calculations and you find that, like, yeah, you really are at 100% occupancy, most of the time, but you do have some room for growth. Midweek slows down, certain times of the year slow down, or certain boat types slow down. There are a collection of strategies you can employ to get after those kind of dips in occupancy to find you a meaningful lift in your year-end revenue take home. So I'll go through a few of those now. The first, this is the most common one. You all know about this, but promotion strategy, right? But the thing I would call your attention to here is to be really intentional about the promotions that you're running and the opportunities to do so. So certainly you can run a midweek promotion, give a discount on dockage for transients if they're coming midweek, or run a promotion for a certain boat type for long-term storage. Those are kind of obvious ones. What I would point your attention to, though, are some of the more hidden ones. So for example, even on those days where you have 100% occupancy, let's say you've got a long-term customer who often, goes away for a week-long stint. They're traveling off the coast, or they are out of harbor for whatever reason. Can you work with them to be able to know when that's going to happen so that you can run a flash promotion and get some transients to fill in those slips while they're gone? That backfill motion, if you can get good at it, can lead to a sizable increase in the revenue that you're taking in without having to expand your inventory or what you offer for slips. The next thing I would point to is pricing. You probably have a hunch now about like what the right pricing is to offer at different times, but when you have that map of where the spikes in occupancy are, that gives you a clearer sense of when your prices should come down and when they can kind of spike up. What I would do is use the promotion strategy to test out these different levels of pricing. And so, at what level do you use it to determine at what level you need to drop your prices to in a midweek off-season slip, and have that test, that experiment, if that gets traction, have that then get solidified into more of a long-term pricing strategy. And then partnerships, again, if we're dealing with spikes, trying to find short-term bursts. Maybe you've got a season where all of your long-term slip holders will head out to sea or vacate the premises, and you want to have some backfill motion. Maybe you partner with a restaurant or partner with a local brewery to run an event to get people in for a short-term spike in revenue while they're gone. Or if you do offer transient slips, that you're doing this on sort of a regular basis when demand is lower. Okay. Let's talk about the final bucket here. And hopefully this is a bucket that most of you are going to get to. So if you're in that first bucket or that second bucket, maybe, in 6 months from now, you're closer to 100% occupancy all the time. There's still, even if you're full, a way to make more revenue out of your property. And so we want to start to look to, a few, different strategies that we've already talked about, but can show into a new light into this scenario, and walk through kind of how to play around with this and run some experiments here. So, especially this year, many of you may be looking out at your marina and saying, look, I'm just full. There's nothing else that I can do. I'm taxed. My team is full. We have no more capacity. I'm just curious if there's any more value I can eke out of this property while I've got this demand. And the answer is always yes. There's always ways to drive more revenue. And so I spoke about this briefly. I want to go into it sort of in depth. Let's talk about the art of the backfill. So you may notice that you've got, people come and go all the time. Sometimes they come and go for 2 hours. Sometimes they come and go for 2 weeks. Sometimes they maybe they're doing the Great Loop, or they're really taking an extended period of time away from their long-term storage with you. And those slips or those moorings are sitting empty. We want to figure out, how do we go from kind of just occasionally backfilling a slip to making it more of a core part of your strategy, and one that your boaters are bought in on. That when they sign a contract with you, they give you permission to be able to backfill their slips while they're gone. That we incentivize them to let you know when they're heading out. And that incentive could be, everything from they get a free bottle of wine at your restaurant to they get a portion of the proceeds of that backfill. You can figure out what the right incentive is to match your boaters, to make them want to tell you when they're heading out to sea, so that you can backfill that and make more revenue out of it. So, here's an example of kind of how we do it in our own platform, but you're able, on your dock walks to get a sense of like, oh, this person is out. Are they out for a day? Are they out for a week? And you can use some messaging, whether it's, messaging in a platform like ours, or even just giving them a call if you got their number, to get a sense of how long are you going to be gone for. And if that's a reasonable amount of time and you're not going to be jockeying boats back and forth in tight windows, let's then run that flash sale to try to get some transients in to take advantage of that opening. This adds up over time. So there's a boatyard called McDougall's in Cape Cod, and their service yard, right? So they actually have openings happening all the time. And they had traditionally been focused largely on kind of seasonal slip holders, with only like a handful of slips dedicated to transient guests. But they started to communicate with their guests a little bit more. They started to understand the calendar, and again, incentivize those boaters sharing their plans with the marina. And by doing that, they were able to backfill, and they increased their transient dockage by 100% year over year, and their revenue by 525%. So this is not a small time strategy. This is something that could really work depending on your marina, to find some truly hidden revenue and surface it for you, without, needing to spike prices on your longstanding customers, without creating any kind of an inconvenience. There is opportunity here. The second strategy I'll leave you with, or not leave you with, but give you, for if you're completely maxed out and you're doing great on occupancy, is let's find some new revenue streams out of that demand, because you are the desired location. You are the marina that everybody wants to go to. So can you find another marina that will do, it's the inverse of the strategy I said before. Can you find another marina nearby that is not at the same occupancy level, where you could strike a partnership and some sort of a rev share for your overflow traffic? One that I like even more than that is, because it's simpler, is can you use the vehicles that you have for communicating with your boaters to drive business for other local businesses? And can you charge advertising rates for that? So most marinas will have some sort of approach instructions that they send out. So this is just an example of a typical approach email that you might send out, of like, hey, here's how you should approach when you're coming to stay. You need to, if this is a transient one, but like you need to check in by a certain time, you need to check out by a certain time. Here's our gate code, our Wi-Fi password, etc. There's space in these emails to be able to offer, hey, here's a discount to the restaurant next door. Here is a coupon for a local town tour. And I would talk with the other businesses in your community to see if they want to test out, hey, if they want to purchase ad space in these approach emails or the departure emails, and see if it translates into business to them. This could grow over time to become another new revenue stream for you that is pretty lightweight and no cost to operate. And the final one, this is the biggie, which is just, if you're truly 100% full, let's talk pricing. Let's make sure that you are charging market rates and that you're not undercharging. We don't want to overcharge your guests, but let's make sure you're not undercharging. And find out if there is malleability there where you could charge a little bit more and the market would withstand it. So the best way that I could give you to do this is to try to get some comp data from nearby marinas that will show you kind of what kind of market spectrum you're in, right? So it's a very fictional chart of a collection of marinas that we're comparing in the Florida Keys area. And you want to look more beyond just your rates, right? Because obviously more than just cost goes into determining what marina you're going to pick. Let's look at, do you have a fuel dock or not? Let's look at, is there a restaurant on site? What kind of benefits do you offer that others don't? And take a look at like every lens that you can to try to compare yourself to the nearby marinas and figure out what are they charging versus what are you charging? Do you offer more because you are at 100% occupancy, so something's working right? Can your audience withstand a slight price increase? And you can play around with that a little bit, where you go out with a test price increase and then you use discounting and promotions to walk that back if you need to. But if you're truly at 100% occupancy, it's the right time to do some of the research to figure out, could I move up 10 cents a night, $1 a night, and how would that project out over all of my boats and all of my season? So again, you may be sitting there and thinking, I don't know, is this really worth it? Like there's a lot of stuff in here, things are going okay. Am I gonna see this kind of returns that McDougall saw? And for those kind of still questioning that, I think it's smart to question that. You only have so much time to put into this, and you may just decide, hey, one of these is okay, and doable, but the rest of these seem like too much of a lift. The thing that I would look to though is we've got a free tool on our website. You can just Google Dockwa Marina Occupancy Calculator or any combination of those terms, and it should show up. And it'll give you a sense. It's very transient focused, this calculator, but it will give you a sense, especially if you've got long-term and you're thinking about doing more backfilling, of what that could add to your bottom line at the end of the year. And just by moving your occupancy up 1, 2, 3 degrees, what that translates to for you in terms of revenue brought in. And that'll give you a sense of what's worth trying and what's not. All right, so that brings me to my close. I've left a little bit of time for questions, and I'm happy to dive into any of those points a little bit more deeply. But, I think the bottom line here is this is, let's not let a good boom go to waste. Let's use this as a time to try to tweak a couple of knobs in our operation and figure out if we can come out the other side of it stronger. And everything in here is, has basically a free way to do this, a way that doesn't involve you hiring an agency or bringing on a ton of more staff or making a major expansion to your property. All of these strategies are basically free. They just take a little bit of time and intent, and certainly could be made to move more quickly with software, but can be done by anyone. Thank you very much. I will leave it there. Enjoy the rest of Nashville.